He was mocked for his rusty car, then a 4-star general stepped out and froze them. The opulent ballroom shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, a testament to the wealth and status of its attendees. Soft jazz mingled with the clinking of champagne flutes and the murmur of polite, often self-serving, conversation. In the midst of this glittering tableau, a quiet, almost imperceptible tension hummed, known only to a select few. General Thaddeus Thorne, a man whose presence usually commanded immediate respect and attention, stood near the grand entrance, his eyes, sharp and intelligent despite his 75 years, scanning the room with a knowing, almost melancholic gaze. He was no longer dressed in the simple, unassuming attire he had worn earlier, nor had he arrived in the rusty vintage car that had drawn so much derision. Now, he was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, his silver hair neatly combed, and the medals from a lifetime of distinguished service gleamed subtly on his lapel. Yet, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips as he observed his 2 grandchildren, Blaise Sterling and Seraphina Vance, holding court near the center of the room. Blaise, with his slicked-back hair and designer suit, was pontificating loudly about market trends, his laughter echoing a little too boisterously. Seraphina, draped in silk and diamonds, was gesturing animatedly, her expression a practiced mask of charm, even as her eyes darted around, assessing the net worth of every person who approached. They were still basking in the glow of what they believed was their inevitable inheritance, utterly oblivious to the seismic shift that was about to occur beneath their perfectly manicured feet. Only moments before, the very air around them had been thick with their condescension. "Did you see that old relic pull up, Blaise?" Seraphina had whispered, her voice laced with disdain as the supposedly decrepit vehicle, an old Cadillac, had chugged into the valet line. "Honestly, I thought it was going to fall apart right there. And the man driving it, he looked like he'd crawled out of a thrift store bin. Probably lost, looking for a soup kitchen." Blaise had snickered, adjusting the cuff of his expensive watch. "Some people just don't know when to stay home, do they, Sarah? Imagine showing up to the Thorne Charity Gala looking like that. He probably thinks he can scrounge for leftovers." His words had been sharp, dismissive, echoing through the grand lobby where the old man had briefly stood, a figure of humble solitude amidst the extravagance. General Thorne had heard every word. His posture, outwardly calm, had betrayed nothing of the calculated amusement that now rippled through him. He had even allowed himself a small, private chuckle, a silent acknowledgement of the irony unfolding before him. For the old relic and the man from the thrift store was none other than General Thaddeus Thorne himself, the very man whose vast financial empire they were so eagerly anticipating. The game, as he had come to call this elaborate charade, was indeed over. The final pieces were moving into place, and the true characters of those around him had been laid bare, stark and undeniable. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of expensive perfume and polished wood filling his lungs. The time for pretense was done. The time for revelation had arrived. He had given them every opportunity, had laid out the bait, and they had swallowed it whole, hook, line, and sinker. Now, it was time for the reckoning. The general's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly as he began to walk, each step a measured cadence towards the center of the room, towards the unsuspecting pair who were about to receive the shock of their lives. General Thaddeus Thorne was not merely a wealthy man, he was an institution. His life had been a meticulously constructed edifice of duty, honor, and strategic foresight. From the battlefield, where he had risen through the ranks with unparalleled brilliance, to the boardrooms of the colossal financial empire he had meticulously built post-retirement, his decisions had always been guided by a rigorous code of ethics and a profound sense of purpose. He valued integrity above all else, a quality he had found increasingly scarce in the world around him, especially within the gilded cage of his own family. His military career had spanned decades, marked by strategic brilliance and an unwavering commitment to his troops. He had served in conflicts that tested the very limits of human endurance, making life-or-death decisions under unimaginable pressure. He had seen courage in its purest form, and deceit in its most insidious. He had learned that true strength lay not in brute force, but in unwavering principle and the ability to inspire loyalty through genuine respect. His command presence was legendary, built on a foundation of fairness and an expectation of excellence. Every medal on his chest, every ribbon he wore, told a story of sacrifice and leadership, but also of the quiet dignity he maintained even in the face of despair. He remembered the mud and the blood, the camaraderie forged in adversity, the profound understanding that emerged from shared hardship. These experiences had etched into his very being the value of human life, the importance of compassion, and the sanctity of truth. Upon his retirement, the general had not sought a life of leisure. Instead, he channeled his strategic acumen into the world of finance, building Thorne Holdings Group from a nascent venture into a global powerhouse. He applied the same military precision, the same ethical code, to his business dealings. He championed fair practices, invested in sustainable growth, and always prioritized long-term vision over short-term gains. He often used to say that a true legacy was not just about the numbers on a balance sheet, but the positive impact one left on the world. He had established numerous philanthropic foundations, ensuring a significant portion of his wealth was dedicated to education, healthcare, and veteran support. He believed wealth was a tool, a responsibility, not merely an end in itself. His disillusionment had not been a sudden epiphany but a slow, creeping realization, like rust spreading across a once polished surface. It had begun subtly, years ago, with the casual materialism of his children, then escalated with the unabashed avarice of his grandchildren, Blaise and Serafina. He had watched them grow, not into individuals driven by passion or compassion, but into calculating machines, their every action seemingly predicated on perceived gain. They treated their inheritance not as a legacy to be cherished or a responsibility to be upheld, but as an entitlement, a mere formality standing between them and limitless indulgence. Blaise, his eldest grandson, possessed a superficial charm that masked a cavernous ambition. He spoke of investments and mergers with an air of practiced authority, but the general knew it was all bravado, a performance designed to impress and manipulate. Blaise saw the world as a ladder, and every person in it either a rung to climb or an obstacle to be bypassed. He had never held a steady job that wasn't directly or indirectly supported by the general's influence, yet he spoke of his business acumen as if he were a self-made titan. His conversations often revolved around the latest stock market tips he'd gleaned from a private club, or the ostentatious displays of wealth by others he aspired to emulate. The general recalled one instance, years ago, when he had encouraged Blaise to volunteer at a local community center. Blaise had gone, but only after ensuring a photographer would be present to capture his charitable efforts for his social media. The pictures, however, captured his impatience, his uncomfortable fidgeting, and the hurried way he distributed meager provisions, clearly eager to escape the unpleasant environment. Serafina, his granddaughter, was equally adept at weaving a web of deceit. Her beauty was undeniable, her social graces impeccable, but beneath the veneer of elegance lay a cold, calculating heart. She spent her days flitting from one high society event to another, her conversations revolving around designer labels, exotic vacations, and the latest gossip concerning who was marrying whom for what fortune. The general had often overheard her discussing his declining health with her friends, not with concern, but with thinly veiled impatience, as if waiting for the inevitable moment when his vast estate would finally be unlocked for her consumption. He remembered a Christmas dinner where Serafina had openly critiqued the modest gifts he had given to his household staff, lamenting that such small sums were beneath the Thorne name and implying that the staff should simply be grateful for their employment. She had then launched into a detailed description of the diamond necklace she expected him to buy her for her upcoming birthday. There had been countless incidents that chipped away at the general's trust. The time Blaise had brazenly borrowed a significant sum from a charity fund the general oversaw, purportedly for a can't-miss investment opportunity, only to lose it in a reckless stock gamble, then tried to cover it up with falsified reports. The general had discovered the deception, not from Blaise's confession, but through meticulous audits. When confronted, Blaise had feigned ignorance, then shifted blame, finally resorting to accusations of the general being too old-fashioned to understand modern finance. Another time, Serafina had openly dismissed a distant, ailing relative who had sought the general's help with medical bills, declaring loudly to her friends that family means nothing if they bring no value. The general had watched, a knot forming in his stomach, as she casually discarded a blood relation in favor of social expediency. Their discussions about his future, always under the guise of concern, invariably circled back to the disposition of his assets. They spoke of expanding the family empire, but the general knew they truly meant expanding their own personal vaults. He had tried, in his own way, to guide them, to instill in them the values he held dear. He had recounted stories of his military service, of duty, sacrifice, and the importance of character. He had taken them to charity events, hoping to ignite a spark of empathy. He had even tried setting them up with small, independent ventures, giving them a chance to build something on their own merits, only to see them quickly abandon these projects when they proved to require actual effort and offered no immediate, extravagant returns. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears, replaced by a cynical detachment. They nodded, smiled, and paid lip service, but their eyes, he noted with a profound sense of disappointment, always returned to the gleam of luxury cars, the sparkle of jewels, and the promise of more. Their gratitude felt rehearsed, their affection conditional. The final straw had come during a family dinner, ostensibly to celebrate his birthday. Blaise and Serafina, completely engrossed in their phones, had barely registered his presence. Blaise was scrolling through luxury real estate listings, occasionally muttering about investment properties, while Serafina was engaged in a video call, showcasing her new designer handbag to a friend. When the general had attempted to share a poignant memory from his youth, a story of camaraderie during a difficult campaign, they had politely, but firmly, steered the conversation back to the upcoming family trust restructuring. They had discussed, with alarming frankness, how his old-fashioned investments were holding back their potential, and how, once they had control, they would modernize everything, implying a wholesale liquidation for immediate gratification. Their disdain for anything that wasn't shiny, new, and expensive was palpable. Even his beloved classic car, a meticulously maintained 1965 Cadillac DeVille convertible, which he had owned since his early days as a young officer, a vehicle that held countless cherished memories, was dismissed as a rusty old boat by Blaise, a gaudy relic by Serafina. The sheer dismissiveness, the complete lack of appreciation for anything beyond material worth, solidified a cold, precise plan in the general's mind. He realized that words, lessons, and even direct confrontation would be futile. They were too far gone, too consumed by their own self-interest. He needed to show them, not tell them. He needed to create a scenario where their true natures would be exposed, not just to him, but to themselves, and to the world if necessary. He would strip away his status, his wealth, his very identity, and appear as someone utterly unremarkable, even contemptible, in their eyes. He would become the old man in the rusty car. His plan was meticulously crafted, worthy of a general who had commanded armies. He instructed his trusted legal team, led by the formidable Mr. Davies, to prepare a new will, one that would reflect the true outcome of his test. Mr. Davies, a man of unwavering integrity who had served the Thorne family for over 40 years, initially expressed concern, but the general had simply looked him in the eye and stated, "This is not a game, Davies. This is the final battle for my legacy, and for the soul of my family. I need to know the truth." Davies, understanding the depth of the general's conviction, had reluctantly agreed to his unprecedented instructions. The general arranged for a temporary, humble dwelling in a less affluent part of the city, a stark contrast to his sprawling estate, where he would spend the days leading up to the gala. He sourced simple, worn clothing that would make him appear unassuming, even impoverished. And the Cadillac? He had his loyal mechanic, a gruff but honest man named Frank, deliberately neglect its pristine exterior for a few days, allowing a thin layer of grime, smudges, and a few superficial scratches to accumulate, making it appear genuinely unkempt, a rusty eyesore amidst the gleaming chariots of the elite. The engine, however, remained perfectly tuned, a silent testament to its enduring quality beneath the engineered facade. Frank, privy to the general's elaborate scheme, had chuckled, "General, you truly are a master strategist, even in civvies." The objective was clear: to see who valued integrity over appearances, who would extend kindness without expectation of reward, and who would truly see the person, not the purse. He wanted to ascertain if there was anyone left in his immediate circle who possessed the genuine human spirit he so desperately missed. The general knew, with a certainty born of experience, that character, true character, revealed itself most clearly in the dark, when the lights of status and wealth were dimmed, and there was nothing to gain from civility. And so, the stage was set, the players unaware of the roles they were about to perform in the general's final, most important maneuver. The day of the Thorn Charity Gala arrived, a pinnacle event in the city's social calendar, usually a showcase of philanthropy and power. For General Thorn, however, it was the perfect stage for his grand performance. He had chosen it precisely because it was an event where appearances were paramount, where his grandchildren would be at their most performative, striving to impress the very elite he intended to expose them to. The air was thick with the scent of money and ambition, a perfect backdrop for his carefully constructed reveal. General Thorn, now Thaddeus, a seemingly ordinary elderly gentleman, pulled up to the grand entrance of the Gilded Hotel in his rusty Cadillac. The car, intentionally grimy and scuffed, seemed anachronistic and utterly out of place amidst the steady stream of sleek, high-end luxury vehicles, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, and Rolls-Royces, that glided effortlessly towards the valet. The young valets, in their crisp uniforms, initially hesitated, their expressions a mix of confusion and mild disdain. Their practiced smiles faltered as the old Cadillac chugged rather than glided to a stop. One of them, a fresh-faced young man, actually recoiled slightly as Thaddeus slowly maneuvered the old Cadillac into position, its engine rumbling a little too loudly, a slight puff of exhaust staining the pristine air. A small group of socialites, waiting under the awning, turned their heads, their polite chatter dying down to hushed whispers, their eyes narrowed in judgment. Blaise Sterling and Serafina Vance had just stepped out of a gleaming black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, their designer attire catching the afternoon sun. They were laughing, Blaise adjusting his cuff links, Serafina preening slightly for an imaginary camera. Their eyes, however, were immediately drawn to the incongruous sight of the old Cadillac. Serafina's perfect pout deepened into a grimace. "Good heavens, what is that contraption?" Serafina exclaimed, wrinkling her nose as if detecting a foul odor. "Is this some kind of protest? Or did someone get lost on the way to the junkyard?" Her voice was loud enough to carry, her tone dripping with ridicule, meant for the ears of their peers. Blaise, ever the opportunist for a public display of superiority, chimed in, "I don't know, Sarah. Perhaps it's a delivery vehicle for the catering staff. Though I'd hope they'd have something a bit more sanitary." He chuckled, a condescending sound that grated on the general's ears, even from behind the tinted windows of his vehicle. "Honestly, some people have no shame, pulling up to a 5-star hotel in that rust bucket. It's an embarrassment to the entire event." He cast a dismissive glance at the Cadillac, making sure his words were heard by anyone nearby. General Thorn watched them, a faint smile playing on his lips. They were exactly as he expected. Their true colors were already beginning to bleed through their polished exteriors, a crude stain on a pristine canvas. He felt a quiet satisfaction that his hypothesis was proving correct, even as a familiar disappointment settled within him. It was then that a young woman, one of the valets, stepped forward. Her uniform was slightly rumpled, and she had a smear of grease on her cheek, but her eyes, brown and earnest, held a clear, unfeigned kindness. This was Alara, a college student working 2 jobs to pay for her tuition, her days a tireless cycle of classes, work, and studying in the few hours in between. She had observed the other valets' hesitant glances and the sneering remarks from the arriving guests. She felt a quiet indignation at the injustice of judging someone solely on appearance. "Good afternoon, sir," Alara said, approaching the Cadillac with a warm, genuine smile. Her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the murmurs of disdain. "Welcome to the Thorn Gala. Would you like me to park your car for you?" She didn't flinch from the car's appearance, nor did her smile waver. She simply saw an elderly man, and offered her service with respect, as she would to any other guest. Her movements were graceful, unburdened by the snobbery that permeated the air. Thaddeus, playing his part, nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you, young lady. She's an old one, but she's reliable." He paused, looking at her, observing the genuine warmth in her eyes. You seem busy. Are you sure you have time for an old vehicle like this? Elara chuckled softly. It's always busy on gala nights, sir. But it's a good kind of busy. Just trying to earn my way through college. She didn't complain, didn't hint at her struggles or the long hours. Her resilience was evident in her calm demeanor, her quiet strength shining through. Every car deserves a good parking spot, she added with a wink, a simple gesture of shared humanity. As Thaddeus stepped out, dressed in his plain, slightly ill-fitting suit, Serafina let out a small, theatrical gasp, clutching Blaze's arm. Blaze, look! He's actually coming in. Oh, the shame of it. It's scandalous. She pulled Blaze closer, whispering conspiratorially, but loudly enough for a few onlookers to hear, he probably just walked out of a soup kitchen. We should tell security. He'll tarnish the Thorn name. Her face was a mask of exaggerated disgust, designed for public consumption. Blaze, ever keen to assert his perceived authority, took a step forward, his chest puffed out. Excuse me, sir, he called out, his voice sharp and imperious, laced with thinly veiled contempt. This is a private, invitation-only event. Are you sure you're in the right place? Perhaps you misread the address for a public soup kitchen? He eyed Thaddeus's simple clothes with open disdain, his gaze lingering on the worn fabric. Thaddeus merely smiled, a private, knowing smile that went unnoticed by the superficial pair. I assure you, young man, I am exactly where I need to be. His voice was calm, a low rumble that contained a hint of steel, a resonance that usually commanded attention, but they were too preoccupied with his appearance to notice its underlying power. Elara, sensing the tension, quickly interjected, stepping subtly between Thaddeus and Blaze. Mr. Sterling, this gentleman is a guest. I just parked his car. She gave Blaze a polite but firm look, her posture conveying a quiet defiance against his arrogance. All guests are welcome here, regardless of their arrival. Blaze scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. A guest? In that vehicle? Elara, please. Some discretion. We wouldn't want the general to see such untoward elements at his gala. It reflects poorly on us, his family. He was referring to General Thorn, his grandfather, completely unaware of the monumental irony of his words, of the very element he was mocking. Thaddeus inclined his head towards Elara, a silent acknowledgement of her kindness. Thank you, young lady. You are a credit to your establishment. A rare gem. He then walked past Blaze and Serafina, who stood frozen, utterly bewildered by his audacity, their faces contorted in expressions of disbelief and disgust. The general felt a quiet strength within him. The test had begun, and the results were already starkly clear. Inside the opulent hotel, the general continued his observation. He deliberately mingled near the periphery, making himself inconspicuous, yet always within earshot of Blaze and Serafina. He chose a quiet corner near a towering floral arrangement, allowing him to observe without being directly engaged. They were, predictably, in their element, flitting from group to group, their conversations peppered with thinly veiled boasts about their inherited wealth and their future plans for the Thorn Empire. Their laughter often echoed a little too loudly, their gestures a little too grand. Once grandfather's assets are fully under our management, Blaze was telling a group of seasoned investors, his voice smooth and confident, oozing false authority, we plan to liquidate some of the older, less profitable ventures. Modernize, you understand. Maximize returns. His portfolio is, rather traditional. He then lowered his voice conspiratorially, as if sharing a profound secret, the old man has some sentimental attachments to some archaic charities, some failing enterprises. But sentiment doesn't pay the bills, does it? We'll streamline everything, cut the dead weight. The investors, though outwardly impressed by his apparent ruthlessness, exchanged subtle glances, some perhaps sensing the superficiality beneath his bravado. Serafina, meanwhile, was charming a prominent socialite and a famous philanthropist. "Oh, darling, the family estate is just massive," she cooed, her hand fluttering dismissively, laden with sparkling diamonds. "Honestly, it's a nightmare to maintain. Such a burden. All those old rooms, the antique furniture, it's simply dated. But soon, it'll all be ours, and we can finally do something truly spectacular with it. Perhaps a multi-million-dollar renovation, or even, sell parts of it for development. Imagine the returns. We could build luxury condos overlooking the gardens." She laughed, a tinkling sound devoid of genuine mirth, a calculated sound designed to impress. The philanthropist offered a strained smile, a flicker of concern crossing her face. Thaddeus, observing from a short distance, felt a familiar pang of disappointment, but it was now tempered with a cold resolve. There was no longer any doubt. He even approached them at one point, feigning confusion, deliberately stumbling a little to appear frail. "Excuse me," he began, his voice raspy, slightly tremulous, "I seem to have lost my way. Could you perhaps direct me to the food? I'm quite peckish." Blaise looked at him, his expression one of pure irritation, his eyes narrowing. He clearly remembered the old man from the entrance. "Look, old man," he snapped, his voice sharp and dismissive, "this isn't a buffet line for vagrants. The food is over there, in the main hall. Try to blend in, if you can. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're having an important conversation. This is a private gala, not a public soup kitchen." He waved a dismissive hand, not even making eye contact, turning his back to resume his conversation. Serafina, ever the more overtly cruel, added with a tight, fake smile that didn't reach her eyes, "And please, try not to lean on anything. You might scuff the marble or soil the antique tapestries. They are quite valuable, you know." She offered a saccharine smile to her socialite friend, as if to apologize for the interruption. Thaddeus simply nodded, his eyes lingering on their faces, absorbing every nuance of their contempt, every flicker of their disdain. He felt a quiet anger, but also a profound sadness. He turned away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving them to their self-congratulatory chatter, their hollow laughter. He noticed Alara again, moving efficiently through the crowd, helping an elderly woman find her coat near the cloakroom, then swiftly returning to her post at the valet stand, her movements graceful and uncomplaining, her smile a constant, gentle presence. She was a stark contrast to the entitled arrogance he had just witnessed, a beacon of genuine human decency in a sea of superficiality. Her quiet acts of kindness were not for show, they were simply who she was. Later, as the gala began to wind down, its glittering facade dimming with the late hour, Thaddeus returned to the valet stand. He pretended to have trouble with his car keys, fumbling them, and making a show of inspecting the rusty Cadillac's tires, muttering to himself about a possible flat. The air was colder now, the remaining guests more impatient, eager to depart. Blaise and Serafina were waiting for their own vehicle, their patience clearly wearing thin after a long night of networking and pretense. They saw Thaddeus struggling with his keys and inspecting his tire. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Serafina muttered under her breath, loud enough for Thaddeus to hear, her voice a sharp hiss of annoyance. "Still here? Does he expect someone to push-start that antique for him? He's clearly trying to draw attention." Blaise scoffed, adjusting his already perfect tie. "Perhaps he needs a ride home. We should offer him a bus fare. It's the charitable thing to do, isn't it, Sarah? At a charity gala, no less." He winked at his sister, and they shared a snide chuckle, completely unaware that the man they were mocking held their entire future in his hands, that their words were sealing their fate. The general observed their callous amusement, his resolve hardening further. Alara, noticing Thaddeus's predicament, immediately approached, her steps quick and purposeful. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, her brow furrowed with genuine concern, her voice warm and clear. "Do you need any help? Sometimes these older cars can be a bit tricky with their keys." She knelt down, surprisingly knowledgeable, and looked at the tires. "Looks like it's a little low on air, sir. Not a full flat, but enough to make driving uncomfortable." I can grab a portable pump from the office if you'd like. It'll just take a minute, and it's no trouble at all. Her practical kindness was unwavering. Thaddeus shook his head, testing her resolve. That's very kind of you, young lady, but I wouldn't want to trouble you. You've had a long night already. You look tired. No trouble at all, sir, Alara insisted, already heading towards the valet office, her movements swift and efficient. It's no bother. We're here to help our guests. It's part of the job, and it's the right thing to do. She returned quickly with a small, portable air compressor and began attaching it to the tire valve, her movements efficient and practiced, despite the late hour and her apparent fatigue. The general watched her, his heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't felt in a long time, genuine admiration. Here was someone who truly embodied the values he championed, someone who gave freely of her time and effort without any expectation of reward, without any judgment of appearance. Her spirit was untainted, her kindness pure. Blaise and Serafina watched the scene unfold with barely concealed exasperation, their faces a mixture of impatience and disdain. Honestly, Alara, Serafina called out, her voice sharp, tinged with annoyance, must you waste your time on every pedestrian who happens to stumble in here? We're waiting, you know. Our car is here. Her tone implied that Alara's time was less valuable than theirs. Alara merely smiled politely without looking up, her focus on the task. Just a moment, Mr. Sterling. Almost done. Her composure was remarkable. As Alara finished, Thaddeus straightened up. Thank you, young lady. You've gone above and beyond. You've shown me true kindness. What is your name? Alara, sir, she replied, wiping her hands on a cloth, her smile gentle. Just Alara. Alara, he repeated, a thoughtful expression on his face, a name he would soon etch into his legacy. A beautiful name for a beautiful spirit. You have a kindness that is rare, a genuine humanity that truly shines. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill, deliberately chosen to be more than a typical valet tip, a gesture of profound gratitude. Please, take this for your trouble. For your unwavering generosity. Alara's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the generous tip. She looked at the bill, then back at the old man, a flicker of confusion in her gaze. Oh, sir, you don't have to. I was just doing my job. It really was no trouble. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the large sum, but he pressed it into her hand, his gaze firm but kind. Consider it a small token of my appreciation, Thaddeus said, his eyes twinkling, a profound understanding passing between them, though she still did not grasp the full meaning. For your genuine humanity. It is a debt that cannot truly be repaid. As Alara reluctantly accepted the money, still looking a little overwhelmed, Blaise and Serafina's luxury car pulled up. They cast one last contemptuous glance at Thaddeus and his rusty Cadillac before speeding off, their tires squealing slightly, eager to escape the unpleasantness, completely oblivious to the monumental decision that had just been solidified in the general's mind. His test was complete. He had found his answer. The stage was now set for the final act, the curtain about to rise on a dramatic revelation. The air in Mr. Davies's law office was thick with anticipation. The mahogany walls seemed to absorb the hushed murmurs and the nervous energy emanating from the assembled family members. Blaise Sterling sat rigidly in his chair, his eyes darting between the closed door and Serafina Vance, who sat opposite him, her elegant legs crossed, a faint, confident smile playing on her lips. A nervous energy hummed around them, a tremor of greedy anticipation. Today was the day. The reading of General Thaddeus Thorne's will. They had, of course, already mentally spent their inheritances 1,000 times over, planning new ventures, lavish purchases, and grand displays of their imminent wealth. Blaise checked his watch repeatedly, Serafina smoothed her dress, adjusting her posture to appear effortlessly composed. Suddenly, the heavy oak door swung open, and Mr. Davies, the general's long-standing attorney, entered. His expression was as inscrutable as ever, a master of calm professionalism, but there was a subtle glint in his eye, a hint of suppressed amusement, that Blaze and Seraphina failed to notice. They merely straightened their postures, ready for the formality to begin, eager to claim what they believed was theirs by right, by birth. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Davies began, his voice calm and resonant, cutting through the tense silence. "Thank you for coming. As you know, we are here today for the reading of General Thaddeus Thorne's last will and testament." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the expectant faces, a slight pause for dramatic effect, perhaps. Just as he was about to continue, the office door, which had been left slightly ajar, slowly opened further. A figure stepped in. It was General Thaddeus Thorne. But this was not the frail, unassuming old man in the rusty car. This was General Thorne in his full glory, every inch the formidable leader he had always been. He was dressed in a pristine general's uniform, tailored to perfection, adorned with a dazzling array of medals and ribbons, each a testament to a lifetime of unparalleled service and valor, gleaming under the office lights. His posture was ramrod straight, his shoulders broad, his eyes, sharp as obsidian, surveyed the room with an almost regal authority, taking in every shocked face. He wasn't leaning on a cane, he strode in with the confident, measured gait of a man who had commanded armies, a presence that filled the room. Behind him, almost like a shadow, stood a gleaming 2024 Rolls-Royce Phantom, its polished chrome reflecting the morning light, a stark, undeniable contrast to the rusty Cadillac they had so vehemently mocked just days earlier. He had arrived in it, driven by his personal chauffeur, making an entrance that utterly redefined the very concept of power and presence. Blaze and Seraphina's mouths fell open. Their carefully constructed masks of composure shattered instantly, crumbling into dust. Their faces drained of all color, turning from confident expectation to utter disbelief, then to dawning horror, a sickening realization washing over them. They stared, unblinking, as their grandfather, whom they had believed to be at death's door, if not already in his grave, walked into the room, vibrant, undeniably alive, and radiating an intensity that was almost frightening. "Grandfather?" Blaze stammered, his voice a mere whisper, laced with a potent cocktail of shock and fear, a desperate tremor in his throat. But you were, we thought," he trailed off, unable to complete the sentence, the implications of his grandfather's unexpected presence too vast to comprehend. Seraphina, equally stunned, could only manage a choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth, stifling a sound of pure terror. The diamonds on her fingers suddenly seemed to mock her, cold and heavy, symbols of a wealth that was perhaps not as certain as she had believed, now a painful reminder of her folly. General Thorne offered them a small, grim smile, a chilling expression of triumph. "Surprised, are we?" he intoned, his voice resonating with an authority they had long forgotten, or perhaps, never truly acknowledged. It was the voice of a commander, leaving no room for doubt. "Did you truly believe I would depart this world without ensuring my legacy, and my fortune, fell into the right hands? Did you think I was so easily fooled?" Mr. Davies, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, gestured to a vacant chair at the head of the table. "General Thorne will be joining us for the reading of his will today." His tone was perfectly neutral, but his eyes held a knowing glint. The general took his seat, his gaze piercing, unyielding, settling first on Blaze, then on Seraphina. They squirmed under his scrutiny, suddenly feeling the crushing weight of their past actions, the bitter sting of their casual cruelties, the hollowness of their pretense. The air crackled with a palpable tension, far more potent than any nervous anticipation. It was the tension of judgment. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. "As per General Thorne's instructions, I shall now read the will. It is rather comprehensive." He began to read, his voice clear and steady. The initial clauses were standard, bequests to various charities the general had long supported, provisions for his loyal staff, and a few minor family members who had shown him genuine respect over the years. Blaze and Seraphina listened with mounting impatience, their eyes darting, waiting for the inevitable mention of their names, the vast sums that would be allocated to them. But the names were not mentioned. Their impatience gave way to a growing unease. Then, Mr. Davies's voice took on a more formal, almost chilling tone, a shift in cadence that signaled the approaching climax. And now, for the disposition of the bulk of General Thorne's estate, including all major assets, properties, and financial holdings, valued in excess of several $billion. Blaze leaned forward, a greedy glint in his eyes, his breath held in anticipation. Serafina clasped her hands, a nervous tremor running through her, a desperate hope clinging to her fading composure. "I, General Thaddeus Thorne," Mr. Davies read, quoting directly from the meticulously prepared document, his voice clear and resonant, "being of sound mind and body, and having observed the true character of those around me, hereby declare the following, to my grandson, Blaze Sterling, and my granddaughter, Serafina Vance, I bequeath a single, symbolic sum of $1 each, representing the absolute void of their character and the immense disappointment they have brought into my life. Their consistent display of greed, superficiality, and utter disregard for human decency, particularly as evidenced by their behavior towards an old man in a rusty car, has proven them utterly unworthy of the legacy I have built and the trust one once hoped they might earn." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning, echoing in the stunned silence. Blaze gasped, a guttural sound of disbelief, his eyes wide with horror. "No," he choked out, his face contorted with rage and incredulity. Serafina let out a small shriek, a desperate, animalistic sound, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and fury, tears springing forth. "This is an outrage!" Blaze roared, leaping to his feet, his chair scraping loudly across the polished floor. His face was contorted with rage, disbelief, and a dawning terror. "This is a joke. He's senile. This is clearly coercion. You can't do this, grandfather." "Quiet, Blaze," General Thorne said, his voice cutting through the outburst like a laser, cold and unyielding. "I am neither senile nor coerced. Every word in that document is my considered judgment, formed over years of observation, and solidified by recent events." His eyes, cold and unwavering, fixed on his grandson, piercing his very soul. "Do you recall the old man in the rusty Cadillac, Blaze? The one you so gleefully mocked, suggesting he belonged in a junkyard or a soup kitchen? The one you dismissed as an embarrassment to the Thorne name? That old man was me. Your own grandfather. A man who was merely seeking to understand if there was any shred of decency left in your hearts, if you possessed even a sliver of the humanity I value above all else." Blaze staggered back, as if struck by a physical blow. The realization hit him with the force of a physical impact, a tidal wave of humiliation and dread. The old man, the rusty car, the charity gala, it all clicked into place, a horrifying, inescapable puzzle, the pieces of their own cruelty fitting perfectly. Serafina, tears streaming down her face, slumped back into her chair, clutching her chest as if in physical pain, a silent scream of despair escaping her lips. The humiliation, the monumental folly of their actions, crushed them under its immense weight. Their arrogance had been their undoing. Mr. Davies continued, his voice steady, unwavering, delivering the final, devastating blow. "And finally, for the remainder of General Thorne's vast estate, including all liquid assets, properties, and control of the Thorne Holdings Group, valued in excess of several $billion, to be utilized for its intended purpose of fostering progress and supporting genuine human endeavor. I hereby bequeath it all, in its entirety, to Ms. Alara Vance. Her unwavering kindness, genuine compassion, and selflessness, demonstrated despite her own challenging circumstances, prove her to be the only individual truly worthy of carrying on my legacy. She saw a fellow human being in need and offered help without expectation of reward, without judgment of appearance, a quality far more valuable than any material wealth, a true reflection of the values this empire was built upon." The room was silent, save for Serafina's ragged sobs and Blaze's heavy, desperate breathing. Alara Vance. They didn't even know who that was. They knew no one by that name in their privileged circle, no one who fit their narrow definition of worth. The name was utterly foreign, utterly insignificant to them, until this very moment. General Thorne leaned forward, his eyes fixed on his grandchildren, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, final pronouncement. You chased wealth your entire lives, he stated, his words like sharp shards of ice. But you failed to cultivate the one true currency, character. You focused on what you could take, not what you could give. And for that, you have lost everything. Your inheritance was never about money, it was about responsibility. A responsibility you were never fit to bear. The climax was complete. The mask had fallen, and the true, devastating reality of their disinheritance settled upon them, a cold, unyielding weight, a future they had so confidently predicted for themselves vanishing into thin air. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Blaise and Serafina. The news of their disinheritance, carefully orchestrated by General Thorne to be released to the press shortly after the will reading, exploded across social media and financial news outlets. The story of the Rusty Car test, the general's ingenious ruse, and his grandchildren's public humiliation became a sensational tale, a cautionary fable for the modern age. It was discussed in boardrooms and whispered in exclusive clubs. Their names became synonymous with greed and arrogance, a public spectacle of their undoing. Their carefully constructed world, built on the shifting sands of inherited wealth and social standing, crumbled around them. Blaise, who had leveraged his supposed future inheritance to secure various speculative investments and loans, found himself in immediate financial ruin. Banks called in their lines of credit, business partners, who had once fawned over him, now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man who had not only lost his fortune but also his reputation. His apartment, leased with the expectation of a limitless trust fund, was repossessed. His designer suits and luxury car, once symbols of his self-importance, now served as painful reminders of his spectacular fall. He spiraled into a bitter, resentful state, blaming everyone but himself for his misfortune, convinced he was a victim of his grandfather's cruelty. He had lost not just money, but every last shred of dignity, every illusion of importance. He was forced to move into a tiny, dilapidated apartment, his once pristine wardrobe now hanging neglected in a cramped closet, his expensive tastes a cruel joke played by memory. Serafina's descent was equally precipitous. Her social circle, famously fickle, abandoned her with chilling speed. Invitations ceased, calls went unanswered, and whispers followed her wherever she went, always about the disinherited Thorne. The high-end boutiques where she once spent fortunes now refused her credit, their doors effectively closed to her. Her carefully curated image of a glamorous heiress evaporated, replaced by the humiliating reality of a woman who had lost everything because of her own arrogance, her own superficiality. She was forced to sell her exorbitant possessions, piece by agonizing piece, her designer handbags, her diamond jewelry, her lavish wardrobe, to cover mounting debts, each sale a fresh wound to her pride. The shame was a constant companion, gnawing at her sanity, driving her to increasingly desperate measures. Both Blaise and Serafina, once so accustomed to opulence and effortless living, found themselves utterly destitute, forced to confront a reality they had always sneered at, working for a living, and barely scraping by. Blaise found himself working a low-paying retail job, forced to interact with the common people he once despised. Serafina, her hands once adorned with diamonds, now worked as a part-time cleaner, her skin chapped from harsh detergents, her beauty fading under the stress of her new, brutal reality. Meanwhile, Alara's life was transformed beyond her wildest dreams. She had been called back to Mr. Davies's office a few days after the will reading, believing it was related to some administrative issue with her valet job, perhaps a small bonus or a permanent position. She remembered the kind old man, Thaddeus, and the generous tip, but the full scope of what was happening was utterly incomprehensible to her, far beyond anything she could have imagined. She sat nervously as Mr. Davies, with General Thorne present, explained the extraordinary details of the will. When she finally understood that she, a humble college student working 2 jobs, was the sole heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, she almost fainted. Tears streamed down her face, not of greed, but of profound shock, overwhelming gratitude, and a disbelief so absolute it was almost painful. She felt a profound responsibility settle upon her shoulders, a weight she knew she must bear with honor. This can't be real, she had stammered, her voice trembling, her mind reeling. Why me? I'm just Alara. I just tried to be kind." General Thorne had looked at her, his eyes warm, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "Because, Elara," he had explained gently, his voice filled with a quiet satisfaction, "you possess the rarest and most valuable form of wealth, an uncorrupted heart. You saw a struggling old man, not an opportunity. You extended kindness without expectation, without judgment, and that, my dear, is worth more than all the gold in the world. It is the foundation upon which true legacy is built." He had seen in her the very values he had sought to cultivate in his own family, values that had sadly eluded his grandchildren. The general immediately established a trust fund to cover her education, ensuring she could finish college without the burden of debt, pursuing her dreams without financial strain. He provided her with a beautiful, modest home, far from the extravagance of his sprawling estate, but a place she could truly call her own, a sanctuary where she could grow and reflect. He then appointed her to a position within Thorne Holdings, not as a figurehead, but to learn the intricacies of the business from the ground up, under the careful mentorship of Mr. Davies and a team of trusted advisors, ensuring she was prepared for the immense responsibility ahead. Elara, despite the staggering change in her fortunes, remained remarkably grounded. She continued her studies diligently, but now with a newfound peace of mind and an even greater sense of purpose. She was serious about her responsibilities, dedicating herself to learning every facet of the business, determined to honor the general's trust and use the wealth for good. She had been given an incredible gift, and she resolved to use it not for personal indulgence, but for the betterment of others, just as General Thorne had always intended, and perhaps, even more so. Months later, the world had largely moved on from the scandalous headlines, but the ripples of General Thorne's decision continued to shape lives in profound ways. General Thaddeus Thorne, now truly retired from the demands of business, spent his days in quiet contentment, a man at peace with his choices. He occasionally visited Elara at the Thorne Holdings headquarters, observing her with a deep sense of satisfaction. She was flourishing, her innate intelligence and compassion now channeled into meaningful work. She had initiated several philanthropic projects, focusing on education, community support, and environmental conservation, mirroring and even expanding upon the general's own values. He found immense peace in knowing that his legacy, built on principles of integrity and hard work, was now in the hands of someone who genuinely understood its true purpose, someone who would nurture it with a caring heart. He had not just passed on wealth, he had passed on a torch, and it burned brighter than ever before. Blaise Sterling and Serafina Vance, stripped of their privilege and forced to confront the harsh realities of life without their grandfather's fortune, found themselves working menial jobs, a stark, painful contrast to their former lives. Blaise, once a self-proclaimed business prodigy, now found himself struggling to keep a low-paying retail job, his arrogance replaced by a bitter resentment, a constant gnawing regret. Serafina, who had once dictated fashion trends and commanded attention, now worked as a part-time cleaner, her hands, once adorned with diamonds, now chapped from harsh detergents, her spirit broken. They occasionally saw reports of Elara's growing success and the positive impact she was making with the Thorne fortune, a constant, painful reminder of what they had squandered through their own hubris, their own short-sightedness. The irony was not lost on the general. They had so desperately chased wealth, yet it was their lack of character that ultimately cost them everything. The story of General Thorne and the rusty car became a modern legend, whispered in boardrooms and retold in classrooms. It served as a powerful, enduring lesson. True character is not defined by the clothes one wears, the car one drives, or the zeros in one's bank account. It is forged in the quiet moments of decision, in the unseen acts of kindness, and in the unwavering commitment to treating every individual with respect, regardless of their outward appearance or perceived status. For it is often in the darkest of moments, when there is nothing to gain and everything to lose, that the true light of a person's soul is revealed, proving that genuine goodness, however humble its disguise, will always, in the end, find its true reward. If this story resonated with you, and you're curious about more tales of unexpected twists, hidden heroes, and the ultimate triumph of character, then you're in the right place. We have a whole library of similar stories just waiting to be discovered, where appearances are deceiving and true virtue always wins. So, don't miss out. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon so you're always the first to know when a new story drops. And we'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in this story? Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly based on appearances? What do you think General Thorne's greatest lesson was for his grandchildren? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.